"Get her out of here this instant, security. Remove this woman immediately," bank manager Sandra Miller barked, her voice as sharp as a knife tearing through the air. The tension that had been simmering in the grand lobby of the Liberty Financial branch exploded into full force as Jessica Carter, a black woman in her early 40s, dressed modestly yet with an air of elegance, stood her ground at the teller's window with absolute calm. Between them lay a withdrawal slip for $175,000. Security guards sprang forward, hands hovering at their holsters, and the marble-floored bank fell into a deathly silence. "I simply want to withdraw my own money from my personal account," Jessica explained quietly to the nearest guard. "I've shown every form of ID required. I haven't raised my voice and I haven't caused any disturbance." "We don't hand out cash to people like you," Sandra snapped, her tone the only sound in the hushed room. "You're causing a scene. Get her out now." One guard grabbed Jessica's arm, preparing to escort her to the door. But before she moved, Jessica reached into her handbag ever so slowly. What happened next would completely change the course of events. Jessica Carter was living proof of success and power at Liberty Financial, America's leading banking corporation. Over a stellar career spanning more than 20 years, she'd become renowned not only for her razor-sharp managerial acumen, but also for shattering glass ceilings as the first black woman to rise to the role of CEO, upending countless prejudices and barriers along the way. Yet today, she showed up not in a power suit flanked by assistants, but in a deceptively simple yet tasteful ensemble. A crisp white blouse, a tailored navy overcoat, black slacks, and low-heeled pumps. Her makeup was minimal, her natural curls pulled back neatly, and she looked every bit the inconspicuous middle-class customer stepping into the bank on a busy morning. It was a hectic Tuesday morning, sunlight streaming through the branch's tall glass windows and casting sparkling patterns on the polished marble floor. The click of heels mixed with murmured conversations and the steady clatter of keyboards, forming the rhythmic backdrop of the financial machine humming along. Jessica had merged into the line of waiting customers, her eyes quietly observing every gesture and attitude of the branch staff. She hadn't come by accident. She'd been reviewing unusual reports about unfair customer treatment at the very center of finance she led. Quarterly service reviews looked impeccable on paper, but recent personal complaints had nagged at her. So she decided to experience it firsthand, unannounced, unknown to anyone, making a quiet pilgrimage to her own bank to see what was really going on inside. After about 10 minutes of watching, she spotted the first oddity. A wealthy white client breezed in and was greeted with warm smiles, shown straight to a dedicated teller. Meanwhile, an elderly Asian couple was curtly directed to take a number and wait, met with indifferent shrugs by the young tellers milling around the counter. Jessica's brow furrowed as a knot of unease formed in her stomach. Next, a Latino man in work clothes approached to cash a check and was bombarded with questions about his identity and paperwork, an interrogation that stretched the transaction out unnecessarily. Witnessing these scenes made Jessica's heart tighten. She couldn't believe that the institution she'd devoted her life to building could be fostering such blatant discrimination. Her resolve solidified. She rose, smoothed the lapels of her overcoat, and walked to the teller's window with quiet determination. From her bag, she withdrew a leather wallet, laid the withdrawal slip and her ID on the counter, and said, "I'd like to withdraw funds from my account, $175,000. Amy Bennett, the young teller who'd just been cheerfully chatting with the white client, froze when she saw the amount. She studied Jessica from head to toe, her gaze lingering a moment too long on Jessica's natural curls and rich brown skin. The friendly smile that had been on Amy's face vanished. This is a large amount," Amy said in a hushed tone. yet loud enough for nearby customers to hear. Jessica remained composed. "Yes, but it's well within my account limit." Amy hesitated, then picked up Jessica's documents and scrutinized them with obvious suspicion, flipping them front and back. Jessica felt the weight of Amy's distrust like an icy blade at her back. Amy motioned to a colleague nearby. Instantly, a man in a white shirt and deep red tie approached. Jessica caught the name plate on his chest. Greg Harris, senior teller. Greg joined Amy at the counter, arms crossed over his chest, his face set in a stern mask of authority. He spoke in a clear, cold tone. "Is there a problem here?" His question rang out like a declaration, drawing every customer's eyes to Jessica, eyes filled with doubt and judgment. Jessica felt the pressure tighten around her. She replied evenly, as if this were the most ordinary request in the world. "No problem at all. I simply want to withdraw my own money." Greg frowned and shook his head, then turned back to Amy. "Double-check her account. We've had a lot of fraud cases lately, especially with customers like this." "Customers like this?" The words sliced through Jessica like a blade. They confirmed the suspicions she'd harbored about Liberty Financial's internal culture. Jessica inhaled slowly, tamping down the anger rising in her chest. This was no longer just a test of service quality. This was a turning point that would change everything. And she, Jessica Carter, the powerful CEO of Liberty Financial, would never allow such injustice to persist under her watch. The moment Jessica reached the teller's window, Amy Bennett's suspicion was immediate. Amy over-scrutinized Jessica's ID, her eyes flicking between the document and Jessica, as if searching for some hidden discrepancy on the customer's face. Amy's deliberate slowness began to test the patience of the people waiting behind Jessica. They frowned and whispered among themselves, the atmosphere growing palpably tense. "Could you please provide another form of identification?" Amy asked abruptly, her tone suddenly icy, a stark contrast to the friendly manner she'd shown just moments earlier with the white customers. Jessica lifted an eyebrow but stayed calm. She quietly opened her wallet and withdrew her Liberty Financial bank card, the one she always carried. Amy nearly snatched it from her hand, her gaze still laden with doubt as she inspected it, even rubbing her fingertip across its surface to check its authenticity. At that moment, Jessica noticed several customers pulling out their phones to record the scene. She understood instinctively. Amy's unorthodox behavior was making her the center of unwanted attention. Yet Jessica remained composed, standing patiently to see how Amy would react next. Amy then leaned toward her colleague, Greg Harris, and whispered something so softly it barely registered, but carried the weight of secrecy. Greg looked up at Jessica instantly, narrowing his eyes with suspicion. A 15-year veteran of Liberty Financial, he'd earned a reputation for keeping the bank safe by treating any questionable client with extreme caution. But today, Jessica wondered, was that caution truly about security, or just a veneer for the subtle discrimination that ran through the institution? Greg walked deliberately to the counter where Jessica stood, each step radiating an unnecessary stiffness and severity. Standing beside Amy, he stared at her computer screen for a moment before shifting his stern gaze to Jessica and demanding, "Ma'am, please confirm once more. You really want to withdraw $175,000 in cash right now?" His voice was loud enough that almost everyone in the queue heard. Conversations halted mid-sentence. The normally bustling branch froze under an invisible chill. Jessica knew Greg was deliberately engineering this awkward moment, hoping she'd back down. "Exactly," Jessica replied, enunciating each word with calm confidence. I want to withdraw that amount." Greg looked taken aback by her composure, his face tightening in frustration that Jessica refused to be rattled. He glanced at Amy, then back at his screen, and shook his head in a complex display of reluctance. "We'll need to verify your account very carefully," he said, deliberately stressing, "very carefully." His eyes swept over Jessica's simple attire and natural curls, as though every detail somehow justified his unfounded suspicions. "Is there a problem with my account?" Jessica asked softly but firmly, determined not to let Greg off the hook for manufacturing this tense scenario. Greg cleared his throat and averted his gaze to Amy as if to shield himself from Jessica's piercing stare, then replied coolly, "We're just following bank policy, especially when handling large withdrawals like this." Jessica knew that a white customer in the same situation would never face these questions or this attitude. Confronted with this bias, she felt more acutely than ever the troubling reality within the very bank she led. Greg resumed typing, stealing glances at Jessica as if hunting for any excuse to delay or deny her transaction. She stood silently at the counter, hearing the murmurs behind her. An impatient older white man leaned to his neighbor and whispered, "She must have some problem. Who withdraws that much cash?" Jessica's heart tightened at the remark, but she controlled her emotions completely. This was no longer merely a test of service. It was a confrontation with the ingrained prejudice in the system she had once believed in and built. Determined, Jessica resolved that she would not leave until every injustice was laid bare in the brightest light. Greg stopped typing and slowly looked up at Jessica, his eyes betraying an ever-deepening suspicion. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a cold murmur, each word clear enough for Jessica to hear. "I'm going to need you to explain exactly where this $175,000 came from. This is not a routine transaction for a customer like you." He emphasized customer like you with malicious intent, the tone cutting through Jessica like an invisible blow. Her heart raced for a moment, but her mind quickly regained calm. She met his gaze and replied with absolute composure, "This is money from my personal account, accumulated through my work. I'm confident your records can easily verify that." Greg curled his lip into a mocking smirk. His eyes flicked down once more to Jessica's simple outfit, before he deliberately raised his voice so the curious onlookers behind could hear. "Are you sure this money is legitimate? We've had several fraud cases lately, especially from accounts belonging to people like you, with large, unexplained sums." Tension in the lobby ratcheted up as dozens of pairs of eyes fixed on Jessica with a mix of curiosity, doubt, and even contempt. Soft whispers spread, and a few people craned their necks to get a better look. Jessica spotted phones raised to record every moment. Everything was unfolding exactly as Greg intended. She was the star of a carefully orchestrated humiliation. Jessica drew in a slow, steady breath. She knew Greg was counting on her losing her cool, hoping she'd abandon her withdrawal in shame. But she refused to give him that satisfaction. With startling calm, she spoke, her voice strong and audible to everyone. "I've been a Liberty Financial customer for years without any issues. I'd like to know why you believe there's a problem with my account." Greg hesitated for a split second, clearly unprepared for Jessica's unwavering poise. Then his face hardened even more, as if he felt personally challenged and needed to reassert his authority. "We're just ensuring the safety of all our clients," he declared, even louder this time. "Some individuals, people who look special like you, are often involved in complex money matters. This is simply a security procedure." Jessica felt each word sting like a pinprick. For years, she had fought to dismantle racial barriers and prejudices. Yet here, in the very bank she led, she was confronting those biases head-on. Beside her, Amy bowed her head over the keyboard, avoiding Jessica's gaze. Though silent, Jessica could sense Amy's quiet complicity with Greg's accusations, as if they'd rehearsed this routine many times before. Bolstered by Amy's silent support, Greg grew increasingly arrogant and confident. If you cannot clearly prove the source of these funds, we will have to refuse your transaction, and we may have to report it to the authorities for further investigation. His words rang like a public indictment, triggering an even louder murmur throughout the branch. Jessica felt the wave of scrutiny closing in on her from all sides. Yet she stood tall, unflinching, and met Greg's stare again, her tone gentle but firm. "I have all the necessary legal documentation. If you suspect fraud, present me with specific evidence right now. Otherwise, please complete this transaction so I can get on with my day." Jessica's challenge hung in the air, and for the first time, Greg took a small step back, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. But his pride and ingrained prejudice quickly regained control. Clearing his throat, he responded curtly, "Please, wait here a few more minutes. I'll need to consult with my superiors before making a decision." With that, Greg turned on his heel and walked away, leaving Jessica alone at the counter, surrounded by dozens of skeptical, curious stares. She felt the injustice weighing down on her, but she also knew this fight had only just begun. The moment Greg turned his back and stepped away from the counter, Jessica hadn't even had a chance to collect herself when a sharp, youthful voice, oozing arrogance, cut in at exactly that moment to pile on the pressure. "Oh, did you just win the lottery or inherit a fortune or something? Someone like you having this kind of money is, well, pretty rare." Jessica turned to meet the provocateur's gaze. Jason Collins, a young teller who'd only been on the job a short time but was already notorious in this branch for his cocky, attention-seeking attitude. He was leaning casually against the edge of a nearby counter, arms folded, a smug grin twisting his lips. Jason's eyes raked Jessica from head to toe with utter disrespect, as if she were merchandise rather than a valued customer. He raised his voice just enough for those standing nearby to catch every word. "I'm guessing this is money from some kind of settlement, right? Like one of those lawsuits you always hear about. Someone like you must be raking it in from stuff like that all the time." Jessica felt those words strike at her honor and self-worth. By stressing "someone like you," Jason was openly stoking the bias and doubt simmering among the onlookers. A few stifled giggles rippled through the crowd, mingling with a chorus of low whispers. She understood she'd been placed center stage in this orchestrated humiliation, directed by her own staff. Her heart lurched, but she fought to maintain her composure and dignity, meeting Jason's taunting gaze head-on. "My personal affairs don't concern you," Jessica replied evenly. "I just want to complete this transaction as any customer would." But Jason didn't bat an eye at her calm firmness. He stepped closer, deliberately raising his voice to wind her up further. "Sure, but the bank has to make sure your cash is legit, right? There have been plenty of shady funds flowing through accounts, especially from people like you." He enunciated "like you" in slow, deliberate syllables. The branch atmosphere shifted from tense to downright suffocating, a tension so taut it felt ready to snap. Several customers now held up their phones, recording the drama with morbid curiosity. Jessica inhaled slowly, steadying her breath to quell the simmering anger within. She reminded herself she represented not only herself, but also the thousands of silent customers subjected to the same prejudice. This wasn't just her personal battle, it was her chance to expose the deep-seated bias and injustice of her own bank. She swept her gaze across the recording phones, then turned back to Jason with unshakable calm and unwavering resolve. "I'll remember everything you just said, Jason, and I hope you'll remember it too." Her voice was quiet but crystal clear, carrying an undercurrent of power and authority that made Jason hesitate, his first sign of self-doubt. He quickly masked it with a cold smirk, feigning disinterest as he turned back toward the teller line to avoid any further argument. Jessica stood her ground, acutely aware of her pounding heart. She knew the situation had reached its breaking point, and her next move wouldn't just defend her own dignity. It would mark a turning point for the future of Liberty Financial itself. As soon as Jessica finished speaking, strong footsteps thundered from the office behind, sounding decisive, an assertion of absolute authority. The small crowd of onlookers immediately parted, making way for a middle-aged woman in an elegant outfit, her posture brimming with pride as she strode straight to the teller counter. It was Sandra Miller, the branch manager, known not only for her draconian strictness, but also for her cold, ruthless approach. Sandra cast a frosty glance at Jessica, her face betraying nothing but indifference laced with contempt. Without bothering to ask the customer's name or verify her credentials, Sandra launched into a commanding interrogation, her voice loud and clear enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Excuse me, I've just been informed you're attempting to withdraw an exceptionally large sum of money from the bank. Could you explain why?" Her question wasn't a request. It was more like an order. Jessica could clearly sense that Sandra's wording held not a shred of basic respect for her as a customer. Sandra stood there, arms crossed, regarding Jessica as if she were a criminal who needed to confess, rather than a legitimate client exercising her rightful privilege. Jessica replied calmly, her tone gentle yet undeniably firm. "I am withdrawing funds from my personal account. I don't believe I owe anyone an explanation for how I choose to use my own money." Sandra offered a cold, thin smile that made the air around them seem to freeze. Now her eyes revealed everything. She raised a single brow and continued in a provocative, insulting tone. "Liberty Financial is a premier bank. We only serve a certain class of clients, those with clear, transparent backgrounds, not just anyone who walks in and wants to pull out hundreds of thousands of dollars like you're doing." Her words crashed like a thunderbolt through the heavy silence of the branch. Onlookers instinctively took half a step back, stunned by the brazen discrimination coming from the bank's own manager. Sandra deliberately raised her voice, ensuring her standards were heard by all. Jessica paused for a moment, the sting of her words igniting a deep ache inside her. This wasn't just the ignorance of a poorly trained employee. It was a far more serious, systemic issue. Sandra's statement laid bare a troubling truth. The branch's leadership was not only tolerating but actively encouraging racial discrimination. Taking a measured breath, Jessica steadied herself and met Sandra's gaze head-on. Her voice rang out clear and unwavering. "So, what you're saying is I don't belong to the certain class of clients your bank serves." Sandra's eyebrow arched, and she looked down her nose at Jessica, showing not a hint of remorse or hesitation. She shrugged lightly, answering with faux casualness. "I'm simply protecting Liberty Financial's interests. We need to ensure our clients' funds come from legitimate sources. If you feel offended, that's your problem, not mine." Each word felt like a knife twisting in Jessica's pride. Sandra had crossed the line from bad customer service into an outright declaration that Jessica, as a black woman, was unworthy of the same service afforded to others. Around them, a few customers who'd been recording on their phones began whispering among themselves. An elderly woman nearby shook her head, her disappointment obvious. Jessica realized she stood at a crossroads. Back down. or use this moment to expose the shameful truth hidden within her own bank. Jessica locked eyes with Sandra, steel-hard resolve shining in her own. She spoke slowly and deliberately. "I'm sorry you feel that way, but I believe it won't be long before you reconsider the standards you just mentioned." Sandra blinked, momentarily thrown by Jessica's calm strength. Then she quickly masked her discomfort, turned away, and barked an order to her staff. "We will temporarily hold this transaction pending further investigation. That is the final decision." With that, she spun on her heel and strode off, wielding her authority like a weapon, leaving Jessica standing in the stunned silence and the suspicious gazes of everyone around her. Jessica knew as she watched Sandra's heels click away that the real confrontation was only just beginning. As soon as Sandra's arrogant figure disappeared behind the office door, Jessica remained rooted to the spot, her eyes tracking as though calculating her next move. The branch was still thick with tension, and the hushed whispers of the surrounding customers grew sharper by the second. Some even stood motionless, striving to record every tiny detail of this moment on their phones. Jessica showed no sign of fluster. Her composure was unwavering. Instead, she calmly reached into her sleek black purse and withdrew her smartphone. The deliberate, effortless motion instantly drew the attention of every employee in the branch. Amy and Jason exchanged puzzled glances. Their earlier arrogance evaporated, replaced by suspicion and a hint of anxiety. Holding the phone to her ear, Jessica tapped a quick series of numbers. Everyone watched, wondering who she might be calling in this humiliating standoff. "Michael Roberts speaking," came a deep, authoritative male voice. "Hello, Michael. It's Jessica," she replied, crisply, yet calmly, as if discussing an everyday matter. "I'm at the downtown Liberty Financial branch. I've just run into some trouble trying to process a withdrawal from my personal account. You'll need to come down here to handle it." The moment Jessica invoked Michael Roberts' name, Amy and Jason visibly froze. Roberts wasn't just anyone. He was the senior operations director for the entire Liberty Financial Network, second only to the CEO. A regular customer calling him directly was virtually unheard of. Jason swallowed hard, his earlier bravado replaced by genuine panic. He glanced nervously at Amy, who now stood stripped of her former haughtiness, scrutinizing Jessica as if trying to unmask her true identity. Sandra, returning to the lobby after being alerted, stopped dead in her tracks. Her face lost the icy authority it had held moments before, replaced by unmistakable unease. Still holding the phone to her ear, Jessica's calm demeanor only heightened Sandra's discomfort. Who was this woman who could summon the bank's highest leadership with a single call? "Jessica, which branch are you at again?" Michael asked, his tone now unmistakably grave. "The downtown branch. Sandra Miller is the manager here." Jessica stated each word deliberately, shooting Sandra a quick, knowing glance as the manager fidgeted, smoothing her hair to mask her trembling. "I understand. Jessica, I'll be there in 15 minutes. Please hold tight," Michael replied decisively. The call ended. Jessica slipped her phone back into her purse and fixed Sandra and the other employees with a steady gaze. The oppressive tension had shifted. Now, every staff member wore a look of raw unease. Sandra forced herself to compose her features and stepped toward Jessica, attempting a casual tone as if nothing significant had happened. "I didn't realize you knew Mr. Roberts personally. I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding. We can resolve it quickly without involving him." Jessica met Sandra's eyes with steely resolve. Her voice was soft, but carried unmistakable authority. "This is not a misunderstanding, Miss Miller. This is a serious issue that needs to be addressed immediately." Her words resounded through the now silent branch like a verdict. Everything here was about to change. Sandra took an involuntary step back and turned away, unable to meet Jessica's unyielding gaze, her heart pounding as she realized the situation had slipped from her control. In that moment, every person in the branch understood the same thing. They were witnessing the beginning of a confrontation that could alter the fate of everyone present. As soon as Jessica ends the call, not far away in Liberty Financial's executive suite, Michael Roberts sets the phone down with an expression of grave seriousness. He sits motionless for a few seconds, staring into space as if he's just realized something catastrophic he never imagined. The fact that CEO Jessica Carter felt compelled to call him personally about an incident at the downtown branch is the clearest signal yet that events have spiraled far beyond any acceptable limit. Suddenly, he springs to his feet, slams the internal phone back onto its cradle, and speaks with urgent authority. "I need every customer complaint on the downtown branch from the past year, right now. Have them ready for me immediately." "Yes, Mr. Roberts," his assistant replies at once, sensing the critical urgency. Michael strides to the door of his office and flings it open onto the long corridor, where employees pause mid-task to look up in stunned surprise at the usually composed senior operations director now storming past. "I want the downtown branch locked down immediately. No one leaves, especially Sandra Miller and any staff involved, until I arrive to handle this." His voice resonates down the hall. Subordinates spring into action. The executive suite a flurry of activity as everyone recognizes the severity of the situation, one that could have consequences none of them have ever faced. Meanwhile, in the special boardroom on the top floor, the full board of directors is meeting under Chairman Jonathan Davidson. Their session screeches to a halt when a security officer bursts in, urgency etched on his face, and whispers a few words into Jonathan's ear. Jonathan's brow furrows. He orders the giant surveillance screen flicked on. The board turns as live footage from the downtown branch fills the screen, showing CEO Jessica Carter standing composed, yet visibly tense at the teller line, surrounded by Sandra Miller and other staff displaying open contempt and disrespect. Known for his calm, dignified demeanor, Jonathan now looks both appalled and furious. He leaps to his feet, disbelief ringing in his voice. "What is going on here? Who can explain why our own CEO is being treated like a criminal at our flagship branch?" The air in the boardroom grows thick. Board members exchange uneasy glances, none daring to speak first. Michael Roberts bursts into the room, face grim, voice steady with authority. "Chairman Davidson, this is exactly what I'm investigating and addressing right now. CEO Jessica Carter called me directly to report serious racial discrimination at the downtown branch under Sandra Miller's management. I've locked down the branch and am en route immediately." Jonathan glares at Michael for a long moment, struggling to contain his anger. "Michael, I want a full report on what's happening. Right now. I will not tolerate blatant discrimination under Liberty Financial's roof." Michael nods resolutely. "I won't let this go on a minute longer, sir. Those responsible will be held fully accountable." With that, he strides out of the boardroom, leaving the directors in palpable tension. Jonathan turns to the others, voice more serious than they've ever heard. "We need a complete reorganization starting today. I want to know who orchestrated this, and I want it rooted out entirely." Outside the boardroom, the executive offices are electric with urgency. Senior staff scramble to make calls, comb through customer files and service reports, everyone racing to understand a problem long buried that has now erupted into full view. And they all know that in just minutes, Michael Roberts' arrival at the downtown branch will ignite a showdown unprecedented in Liberty Financial's history. Just as anxious whispers still rippled through the branch lobby, the front doors suddenly slammed open with authoritative force, causing everyone inside to spin around. Michael Roberts strode in like a storm, his expression steely with anger. Each of his footsteps rang out decisively on the marble floor, delivering an unmistakable message about the gravity of the situation. "Security, release that woman immediately," Michael ordered, his voice low but commanding, resonating like the highest decree. Instantly, the guard yanked his hands away from Jessica and stumbled back, face pale with panic. Everyone in the bank froze in stunned silence at the sudden, imposing arrival of Michael Roberts, someone they'd only ever seen in internal newsletters or at high-profile corporate events. Sandra Miller, still standing by the teller counter with a smug expression, went ashen. She took a few hesitant steps back, eyes wild as Michael advanced straight toward her. Greg, Jason, and Amy shifted from shock to outright fear. Exchanging horrified glances, they realized something far more serious was unfolding than they could ever have imagined. "Miss Miller," Michael halted in front of her, his gaze razor-sharp, forcing her to avoid his eyes. "Do you even know whom you've been publicly insulting here?" Sandra tried to steady herself, but her trembling voice betrayed her. I was only doing my job, Mr. Roberts. I had no intention of insulting anyone." "Insulting?" Michael cut her off coldly. "You just declared that Liberty Financial only serves a certain class of clients. Do you understand how serious that statement is? And more importantly, do you know whom you were saying it to?" Sandra's earlier air of authority and confidence evaporated. She could only stand there silently, lips quivering as if she wanted to speak but found no words. Michael turned to Jason, Greg, and Amy, his glare so severe that all three instinctively recoiled. He inhaled deeply, pointed directly at Jessica, and spoke each word with unflinching clarity. "The woman you've all been insulting and unjustly suspecting is none other than Jessica Carter, CEO of Liberty Financial, our top leader." The entire branch fell into a shocked, awed silence. Sandra's eyes widened, her face drained of color until it was an almost ghastly white. Greg hunched over a nearby chair, hands shaking as they gripped the desk edge, as though he'd just heard something impossible. Jason froze, youthful arrogance replaced by pure panic. Amy buried her face in her hands, tears welling up in remorse and terror. Jessica remained perfectly still, her gaze calm and unwavering. Michael turned to her and offered a respectful nod, his voice thick with regret. "Jessica, I am deeply sorry. I can't believe this happened in our bank." Jessica gave a small, determined smile and replied firmly, "It's all right, Michael. This is exactly the problem I suspected, but only today has it become undeniably clear." Michael faced Sandra again, his tone now laced with anger and disappointment. "Ms. Miller, I think you understand the consequences of your actions. From this moment on, you and everyone involved will stay here for a full internal investigation. No one leaves until the board reaches its final decision." Sandra took an involuntary step forward, voice quavering with pleading, "Mr. Roberts, this is just a misunderstanding. I didn't know it was Miss Carter. Please give me a chance to explain." Michael raised a hand, cutting her off decisively. "This isn't about misunderstanding or explanation anymore. This is blatant racial discrimination and a serious offense against a client, who, by the way, is our CEO. There will be no excuses." He signaled a nearby security officer to continue closely supervising Sandra and the others. Then he returned to Jessica, his voice earnest. "Jessica, I truly regret this incident. I promise it will be handled to the fullest extent." Jessica met his gaze and nodded slightly, then turned to face Sandra and the staff, her voice steady yet powerful. "I have no doubt, Michael. Now is the time to root out every issue within this bank so no other customer ever endures what I went through today." In that moment, every employee understood that Liberty Financial was on the verge of an unprecedented overhaul. Those responsible would pay the price, and no one could remain on the sidelines of this fight. The tension in the branch was palpable. In that moment, Michael Roberts took a deliberate step toward the center of the lobby, where every customer and employee was watching him intently. He cleared his throat softly, his stern gaze sweeping slowly over the crowd, lingering a moment longer on Sandra as if to ensure no one could escape the weight of what was about to come. "May I have everyone's attention, please?" Michael's voice rang out, firm and resonant, cutting through the hush that had fallen over the bank. "The woman standing here, who has just been treated so unjustly and insulted so grievously, is none other than Jessica Carter, CEO of Liberty Financial, and the person who leads all of us." The instant Michael finished speaking, the entire branch fell into absolute silence, as though the air itself had been sucked out of the room. Astonished, stunned eyes turned to Jessica, who remained poised and dignified before them all. Sandra Miller's confident swagger vanished completely. Her face drained of color, and she staggered back a step, clutching the teller counter for support as her knees trembled. Jason Collins, the same teller who'd been so defiantly arrogant moments before, stood frozen, his youthful features suddenly aged by panic. His hands shook uncontrollably as he tried in vain to hide the fear surging within him. Greg Harris nearly collapsed into the nearest chair, his knuckles white around the desktop edge and cold sweat beading on his forehead. He had always thought his long tenure at the bank would protect him from disaster, but now he realized nothing could shield him from the terrible consequences of his mistakes. Amy Bennett, the youngest of the four, could no longer hold back. She buried her face in her hands and wept openly, tears falling like an admission of guilt before everyone present. Customers in the branch reacted with horror. Some gaped, unable to believe what they'd witnessed. Others immediately raised their phones, capturing this infamous moment in Liberty Financial's history. A few whispered their deep disappointment at the openly discriminatory behavior of their bank's own employees. Michael turned back to Jessica with a look of profound respect, then addressed Sandra and the others with uncompromising severity. "You have all committed a grave error, one that not only betrays your duties but violates basic ethics. You didn't just insult a customer, you directly insulted our CEO, the head of this institution. I trust you understand the consequences you now must face." Sandra tried to speak, but her voice came out weak and quavering. "Mr. Roberts, I swear, I didn't know she was Miss Carter. It was just an unfortunate mistake, a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Michael interrupted, his tone hardening. "No, Sandra, this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was blatant racial discrimination, a symptom of a harmful attitude and culture you've tolerated at this branch for too long. That will not be tolerated at Liberty Financial." Jessica stepped forward, standing beside Michael, her gaze unwavering as she addressed Sandra and the remaining staff. Her voice was calm but carried unmistakable power. "What happened today didn't just wound me personally. It violated the very values Liberty Financial claims to uphold: respect, equality, and transparency. I'm deeply disappointed that representatives of our bank acted in direct opposition to those principles." She paused, letting her words sink in, then continued with resolute determination. "I will see to it that what occurred here never happens again. It's time for Liberty Financial to confront its failings head-on and undertake a thorough reformation so we truly earn the trust of millions of customers." Sandra bowed her head in abject shame. Greg and Jason dared not raise their eyes, overwhelmed by guilt and humiliation. Amy still wept quietly in the corner, keenly aware of her profound error in judgment. In that instant, everyone understood. From this moment on, Liberty Financial would be forever changed. What had just transpired marked the start of a sweeping, irreversible transformation. In the thick silence that had settled over the branch, Jessica slowly swept her gaze across the three people standing before her: Sandra Miller, Greg Harris, and Jason Collins. Her eyes calm, but so icy that it made them all flinch. Not a word was spoken for several seconds, but everyone knew Jessica was about to deliver a verdict from which none could escape. At last, she spoke softly, her voice not raised, but each word crisp and resolute, leaving no room for doubt. "Sandra Miller, Greg Harris, and Jason Collins, I hereby officially declare that, as of this moment, you are no longer employees of Liberty Financial." Her brief but powerful announcement struck like lightning through the hall. Sandra almost collapsed, her face vacant as she leaned heavily on the counter to keep from falling. For someone who took such pride in her seniority and authority at Liberty Financial, this was the most devastating loss she could imagine. Greg Harris could no longer hide his panic. The man who had once flaunted a stable, respected career now trembled, his eyes red with fear and despair. He tried to speak, but his words came out as a weak, strangled whisper, too fragile to excuse or beg. Jason Collins, who only minutes before had been brimming with defiance, now stood motionless, his youthful arrogance drained away. He stared at Jessica with empty eyes, silently pleading for one last reprieve, but it was too late. Jessica continued, her tone icy and unyielding, enunciating every syllable so all could hear. "The racist behavior you displayed is intolerable under any circumstances, especially within an institution like Liberty Financial. You have not only insulted a customer, you have betrayed the very values this bank commits to uphold every day. I will not tolerate it." No one dared utter a word. The branch felt frozen, each of Jessica's sentences cutting deeper than the last. Amy Bennett, though not named in the dismissal, hung her head even lower, tears streaming down her face. She knew she'd narrowly escaped direct punishment, but the lesson she'd learned today would mark her career and life forever. Jessica turned to Michael Roberts and gave him a slight nod, signaling the finality of her decision. He returned her nod with solemn respect, then faced the security officers and issued his own clear, firm command. "Immediately revoke the badges, access cards, and credentials of Sandra Miller, Greg Harris, and Jason Collins. They are no longer permitted on these premises." The guards moved swiftly toward the three former employees. Sandra stared at the floor, her expression a mix of agony and fury, powerless to protest. Greg and Jason handed over their badges with shaking hands, their energy utterly drained. Just as Sandra reached the door, she whirled back and attempted one final outburst, her voice choked but defiant. "You'll regret this. I've given my life to this bank." Jessica met her stare with unshakable resolve and replied coldly, "Ms. Miller, what you should regret is your own failure to understand respect and equality. Those who cannot uphold these values have no place representing Liberty Financial. Remember that." Sandra had no more words. She turned and walked out in utter humiliation, each heavy step echoing the bitter end of her career. Greg and Jason followed without a backward glance. Once the doors closed behind them, Jessica addressed the remaining staff. her voice still authoritative, though softened by urgency. "I want everyone here to understand what happened today. Liberty Financial will never condone any form of discrimination, however subtle. Let this be your final warning. Do your jobs well and treat every customer with absolute respect." Her words rang clear and strong, reaffirming the unchangeable message she'd delivered. The staff nodded in solemn agreement, a silent pledge to remember this pivotal moment. And in that instant, everyone at Liberty Financial knew one undeniable truth: the bank would never be the same again. From this day forward, they would embark together on a new era, one where human dignity always came first. Just after the bank doors closed behind Sandra Miller and the two other employees, Jessica turned swiftly to Michael Roberts and gave a firm nod. In the still tense atmosphere, she spoke quietly, but with absolute conviction. "Michael, we need to convene a company-wide meeting first thing tomorrow morning. Yesterday's incident wasn't just a one-off. It's a symptom of a deeper problem, a hidden disease in the very culture of our organization." Michael immediately nodded in agreement, his expression grave. "I fully agree, Jessica. I'll make the arrangements so everyone can attend." The next morning, 9 a.m., Liberty Financial Headquarters, Main Conference Hall. The largest conference room at headquarters was packed wall to wall. Every employee, from senior executives to entry-level staff, had been summoned. The air was electric. No one knew exactly what Jessica would say, but everyone understood this meeting would be pivotal for the bank's future. Jessica stepped up to the podium with calm authority. She straightened, her gaze sweeping the room before she began, each word measured and weighty. "Yesterday, I experienced firsthand something no customer, especially no Liberty Financial customer, should ever endure. I was subjected to baseless suspicion and discrimination simply because of my appearance and background. What's most troubling is that these actions didn't come from a few isolated individuals. They came from people representing our bank." The room fell completely silent. Faces flushed with shame and realization as employees recognized that Jessica was describing a problem they'd long suspected, but never fully confronted. Her voice grew stronger, more resolute. "From this incident, I've learned that Liberty Financial needs a deep, comprehensive overhaul. We cannot allow our core values, respect, equality, transparency, to be undermined by racism, bias, or any form of discrimination. Therefore, effective today, I am officially launching a bank-wide cultural reform initiative." Gasps of surprise rippled through the audience. Some nodded in eager agreement. Others looked daunted, realizing that the days of business as usual were over, especially for anyone harboring deep-seated prejudices. Jessica laid out the plan in detail. "First, we will establish a new code of ethics. Any discriminatory behavior, no matter how small, will be met with strict, transparent consequences. We will not tolerate anything that compromises respect or equality. Second, starting immediately, all employees must complete an intensive training program on cultural diversity, anti-racism, and bias awareness. Every team member must understand the importance of these issues and their personal responsibility to every customer." She paused briefly, then continued in a softer but still unwavering tone. "Third, we will implement a robust, transparent reporting system. Both customers and staff will be able to report discriminatory conduct without fear of retaliation or further bias." Her words hit home, and the room was rapt. Every person felt the power of her message. Michael Roberts, standing beside her, added with equal determination, "I want everyone to understand that what happened yesterday cannot happen again. Liberty Financial will be a model workplace, where individuals are judged by their abilities integrity, and character, not their appearance or background. Jessica concluded gently but firmly, "I know this won't be easy. It will demand courage from each of us to confront our own biases, but I believe that with unity and strong commitment, Liberty Financial can become a true beacon of equality and respect." When she finished, the hall erupted in applause, first hesitant, then building into a sustained ovation. Every employee now understood that the future Jessica envisioned was not only her own, but that of the entire bank. And from that moment on, a powerful wave of change began sweeping through every corner of Liberty Financial, marking the start of a new era, one in which discrimination would never again find a foothold. As the wave of change swept through Liberty Financial, the lives of Sandra Miller, Greg Harris, and Jason Collins outside the bank took a rapid nosedive. News of the incident spread like wildfire across traditional media and social networks, casting them into the center of fierce public debate. Three individuals who once stood at the pinnacle of power and prestige now faced unprecedented, painful consequences. Sandra, who had once prided herself on her reputation as an authoritative senior manager, found herself completely ostracized. The doors of influence slammed shut the moment she stepped out of the bank. Neighbors who once greeted her warmly now turned their backs as if she carried a contagious disease. Friends and social contacts who had bolstered her career disappeared without a trace. Even her closest former colleagues severed all ties, clearly unwilling to let their own reputations be tainted by association. In the weeks after her dismissal, Sandra rarely left her house. Her windows stayed shuttered, curtains drawn, blocking any view from the outside. In the once luxurious home that had symbolized her success, she became a lonely shadow, sleepless and perpetually anxious, her nerves frayed to the breaking point. Greg Harris fared no better. After more than 15 years at Liberty Financial, he descended into despair and bitterness. Word of his firing traveled quickly through the financial sector, leaving his job prospects effectively nil. Every application and interview ended with polite but icy rejections. No institution wanted to be linked with someone dismissed for racist behavior. His family life collapsed under the strain. His wife felt humiliated and ashamed to be seen with him, and their children endured isolation and taunting at school. In a matter of weeks, the respectable gentleman Greg once was consumed by defeat and disgrace. Jason Collins, the youngest and once most promising, faced perhaps the harshest reckoning. Videos of him insulting CEO Jessica Carter went viral online, racking up millions of views and scathing comments. Social media users rallied to boycott and condemn him. He woke up to hundreds of daily hate messages, turning every moment of his life into a relentless ordeal. Shame and regret crept into Jason's mind as he realized that words uttered in reckless arrogance had irrevocably destroyed his future career and personal life. He moved repeatedly in an attempt to escape public scrutiny, but everywhere he went he was recognized and publicly shunned. Within weeks, all three received formal notifications of lawsuits filed by civil rights organizations and regulatory agencies, accusing them of serious discriminatory conduct and professional misconduct. They were drawn into drawn-out legal battles, each hearing a painful reminder of the fallout from their wrongful actions. At one such courtroom session, Sandra sat motionless, her face pale, eyes fixed on the table as she couldn't bear to look anyone in the eye. Greg shivered beside her, lips moving in silent prayer for a miracle. Jason simply bowed his head, despair in his vacant stare, as he accepted that he had destroyed any chance of salvaging his own future. When the judge ultimately ruled, he condemned their behavior as a clear and egregious violation of ethical standards and fundamental civil rights, imposing stern penalties. News of the verdict spread swiftly, reinforcing their reputations as shameful exemplars of racial discrimination. Sandra, Greg, and Jason each confronted the bitter truth. From the peak of power and fame, they had lost everything: honor, career, and peace of mind, all due to the deep-seated prejudices and missteps they had unleashed. In their isolation and despair, they understood that they had paid a staggering price for the lessons in respect and equality Jessica Carter had taught them. Lessons they would never forget. From the harsh consequences Sandra, Greg, and Jason endured, Jessica Carter's story quickly became a powerful symbol, proof that courage and a sense of justice can triumph over racism. Not just at Liberty Financial, but nationwide, her name and image were invoked with deep respect, showing that one determined individual can spark sweeping change. Jessica didn't stop after overhauling her own bank's culture. Fully aware of her influence and responsibility, she threw herself into anti-racial discrimination campaigns across the country, speaking at conferences, events, and forums of all sizes, using her voice and her story to awaken public consciousness. In a moving address before thousands at the city's largest auditorium, she stood tall, her eyes shining with conviction as she spoke fiercely. "Today, I stand not simply to recount what I endured, but to remind us all that discrimination wounds more than the individuals it targets. It erodes the dignity and soul of our entire society. Each of us has both the right and the duty to stand against that injustice." She paused, surveying the silent crowd hanging on every word. Real change doesn't come from silence. It comes from daring to speak up against injustice, defending the humane and equal values we hold dear. I believe every one of us can make a difference in our own communities. Her speech reverberated through the hall, sparking admiration and resolve. Media outlets spread her message far and wide, creating a groundswell of voices calling out everyday acts of prejudice and discrimination. Jessica, the woman who had been wronged at her own bank yet remained composed and dignified, became a rallying icon for the movement. Across social media, hashtags like "Stand with Jessica" and "End Discrimination" trended, shared, and amplified by millions. Meanwhile, Sandra, Greg, and Jason watched their story's momentum with bitter regret. They stood as living reminders that no one is above another's fundamental rights. Their downfall underscored the devastating, far-reaching cost of prejudice. But Jessica's impact went beyond a cautionary tale. She emerged as an inspiring leader in the fight against social injustice. At the close of her address, her voice earnest and clear, she urged, "I hope this story won't end here. Share it with your friends, family, and communities. Let it fuel your own stand against racism in every small act of daily life." The crowd erupted in prolonged applause, tears of emotion and firm pledges of commitment rising in unison. Jessica looked out over the audience, buoyed by the knowledge that the community was truly awakening and ready to act. Jessica Carter's journey at Liberty Financial became more than a personal triumph or a stern lesson. It was a clarion call to society. Racism has no place in our world, and each of us must speak out against it. With a confident, unwavering smile, she stepped off the stage to be surrounded by hundreds who thanked her, sharing how her story had transformed their understanding of equality and respect. From that moment on, Jessica Carter's story spread far and wide, embodying perseverance, courage, and the resolve to build a fairer, kinder society. A society where every individual is honored and treated equally, regardless of race, gender, or background. That is the powerful message Jessica Carter sends to us all. A heartfelt call for a brighter future in which dignity and justice remain sacred and inviolable. Share this story. Only by acting together can we bring about real change. Thank you for listening. See you in the stories to come.